A Royal Mail train, laden with the equivalent of over $50 million in today's currency, a nation's fortune in crisp banknotes, thunders along the tracks towards London. It's a colossal sum, enough to make any hardened criminal's eyes gleam with unholy desire. Now, envision a disparate group of men, some seasoned villains, others wide-eyed novices, bringing this metallic leviathan to a screeching halt with nothing more than a cunning trick of the light. There were no gunshots. Not a single life was intentionally harmed. This was a heist defined by sheer ingenuity and ice-cold nerve, a plan so audacious it seemed almost fictional. They plundered the seemingly unassailable, $2.6 million. The robbery of the century. Yet, what initially appeared as a flawlessly executed masterpiece harbored a darker truth: the inherent fragility of human ambition. Amateurish errors, and yes, an inevitable form of betrayal, would transform their monumental triumph into a relentless, high-stakes manhunt. At the heart of this audacious plot stood Bruce Reynolds, a man whose criminal ambitions far outstripped his modest beginnings. Reynolds wasn't just a thief. He possessed a certain elegant touch, a suave demeanor that belied his profession. He dreamed of a score so grand, so flawlessly executed, that it would not only secure his financial future, but also etch his name into the annals of criminal history. He harbored a deep-seated frustration with the petty, penny ante scores that dominated the London underworld. The small-time heists were tiresome, yielding minimal returns for maximum risk. What he craved was a grand leap, a definitive statement that would transcend mere thievery and become the stuff of legend. The whispers of an anonymous informant, detailing the Royal Mail train's route and routine, ignited a spark. From the outset, Reynolds laid down a singular, non-negotiable, golden rule. Under no circumstances would a single shot be fired, nor would any life be taken. This wasn't to be a brutish display of force, but rather a sophisticated act of criminal intelligence, a chess match against the system where cunning, not cruelty, would be their ultimate weapon. The meticulous assembly of his team became a testament to his unique leadership. Reynolds wasn't just recruiting thugs. He was curating a symphony of talent. He brought in seasoned, street-smart operators like the charismatic Ronald "Buster" Edwards and the cool, calculating Charlie Wilson, men whose reputations preceded them in London's darker corners. But his net stretched wider, encompassing specialists, individuals with specific skills in trains, logistics, or surveillance, some of whom were decidedly green, virtual novices in the grand, dangerous theater of large-scale crime. The challenge was immense, forging these disparate personalities, with their varied skill sets and moral compasses, into a cohesive, unstoppable unit. This blend of old hands and fresh faces created a dynamic, albeit volatile, cocktail of personalities. Some were driven by sheer greed, others by a thirst for adventure, and a few perhaps just by the thrill of being part of something truly monumental. Reynolds had to be both motivator and mediator, navigating egos and anxieties within his burgeoning criminal enterprise. He understood that the success of such an elaborate undertaking hinged not only on meticulous planning, but also on the fragile bonds of trust and shared ambition among his crew. Each man had to believe in the vision, in the audacious dream of seizing an almost unimaginable fortune from the very heart of the establishment. Before we dive deeper into this incredible tale of cunning and consequence, please hit that subscribe button to join our community of history enthusiasts. Give this video a thumbs up if you're enjoying it so far, and let us know in the comments what city and country you're watching from. Their target was no ordinary mark. It was the Royal Mail train, specifically the Glasgow to London traveling post office. This venerable beast of a train was a legend in itself, known for its nightly journey carrying vast sums of money, cash destined for banks across the UK. Yet, astonishingly, it traveled without heavy armed escort, relying instead on its speed and internal security. The chosen location for their daring ambush was a stroke of strategic genius. Bredego Bridge at Sears Crossing, a desolate, isolated stretch of track in Buckinghamshire. Here, surrounded by darkness and rural silence, they could operate with minimal risk of immediate detection, far from prying eyes or unexpected interruptions. It was the perfect stage for their impending drama. The centerpiece of their diabolical plan was an ingenious, almost childlike trick, yet terrifyingly effective, manipulating the train's signaling system. They would alter a green signal to a stop red, forcing the locomotive to halt precisely at their chosen spot beneath the bridge. This was achieved by carefully covering a green light with a glove and powering a red light with batteries, a brilliant piece of improvisational engineering. Months of painstaking reconnaissance had gone into observing the train's schedule, its precise stopping points, and the rhythm of its journey. This wasn't a smash and grab. It was a choreographed ballet of criminal precision, where every second counted and every detail was meticulously planned to minimize variables and maximize their chances of success. The final preparations were a flurry of hushed activity, charged with an almost unbearable tension. Vehicles were acquired and carefully modified, their identities obscured. The isolated Leatherslade farm was rented as a secure hideout, a temporary fortress where the spoils of their labor would be counted and sorted, away from the prying eyes of the law. To ensure seamless execution, the gang conducted rigorous dry runs, meticulously rehearsing each movement, each roll, down to the second. They practiced the approach, the infiltration, the handling of the money bags, and the escape. The anxiety among the crew was a palpable, simmering undercurrent, a cocktail of fear and exhilarating anticipation. These rehearsals were crucial, ironing out kinks in their elaborate scheme, perfecting the timing, and ensuring that every man knew his precise function when the moment of truth arrived. They were transforming a complex, high-risk operation into a series of well-oiled, instinctive actions, a grim pantomime of power and control. The farm itself, nestled deep in the countryside, became their temporary command center, a place where maps were spread, roles were assigned, and the gravity of their imminent actions weighed heavily on everyone. It was a crucible where ambition and fear were slowly, inexorably forged into a desperate resolve. They discussed contingencies, what-ifs, and worst-case scenarios, attempting to foresee every possible obstacle. Yet, even the most detailed plan cannot account for every human variable, every tiny, unpredictable glitch that fate might throw into the works. The stage was set, the actors were ready, but the script still held unforeseen twists. The silence of the nights leading up to the heist was broken only by the whispers of their planning, the clinking of tools, and the collective, ragged breathing of men on the precipice of a life-altering act. They were gambling everything on one audacious throw of the dice, a single moment that would define their lives forever, where the tension was suffocating. In the pre-dawn hours of August 8th, 1963, the Royal Mail train, with its precious cargo, hurtled through the darkened countryside. Suddenly, with a jarring lurch and a deafening shriek of metal, it screeched to a forced stop. Maitre Jack Mills and his co-driver, David Whitby, were gripped by confusion, their eyes scanning the altered signal, mystified by the unexpected red light in the desolate expanse. Before they could fully comprehend the anomaly, shadows detached themselves from the darkness. The masked and hooded assailants swarmed the train, their presence a terrifying intrusion into the mundane routine of the railway. There were no gunshots. Reynolds's rule was strictly enforced, but the psychological violence, the sheer menace of their silent, hooded forms, was overwhelming. The assailants, wielding crowbars and clubs, quickly incapacitated the crew. Jack Mills, in a desperate display of courage, or perhaps a moment of bewildered imprudence, resisted briefly. For his defiance, he received a brutal blow to the head with an iron bar, a violent act that would haunt him for the rest of his days, scarring the heist's clean reputation. What followed was a truly iconic and astonishing scene, the formation of a human chain. In the flickering beam of their flashlights, under the immense pressure of time and the looming threat of discovery, the gang formed a line, passing the heavy mailbags hand to hand from the postal carriage to their waiting trucks. Each of the 120 bags weighed approximately 40 kilograms, a back-breaking load of pure cash. The air was thick with the grunts of effort, the rapid, shallow breaths, the slick sheen of sweat, and the electric current of adrenaline. The sheer physical exertion, combined with the weight of the fortune they were grasping, was almost unbearable. They moved with a desperate urgency, each man a cog in this high-stakes machinery, driven by the intoxicating smell of money and the adrenaline pumping through their veins. The magnitude of what they were doing, the brazenness of their actions, must have been a heady mix of terror and exhilarating power. The silence of the rural night was punctuated only by their frantic movements, the thud of heavy sacks, and the muffled commands exchanged between them. It was a macabre, meticulously choreographed dance under the cloak of secrecy, a race against the dawn, and the inevitable alarm. As the last bag was hauled aboard, a wave of primal triumph washed over the group. They had done it. Against all odds, they had stopped the unstoppable, plundered the unplunderable. The trucks, now laden with their illicit treasure, rumbled away into the fading darkness, leaving the violated train and its bound crew behind. The initial sensation was one of intoxicating, overwhelming success. They had achieved what seemed impossible, executing a masterstroke that would be talked about for decades. The thrill of victory, however, was fleeting, a brittle veneer over the cracks that were already beginning to form in their meticulously laid plans. They felt invincible, having pulled off the heist of the century without a single shot fired. But in their euphoria, amidst the dizzying rush of adrenaline and the promise of untold riches, they had already sown the seeds of their own destruction, unwittingly leaving a trail that would soon lead the law directly to their doorstep. The journey to Leatherslade Farm, their pre-arranged hideout, was a blur of exhilarating tension. Upon arrival, the remote farmhouse erupted in a cacophony of euphoria. Champagne corks popped, laughter echoed through the rustic rooms, and the air crackled with disbelief and sheer joy. The moment of truth arrived as they began counting the staggering $2.6 million in crisp banknotes. It was a surreal scene. Grown men, usually hardened criminals, giggling like children, throwing wads of cash around. The legend of them playing Monopoly with real notes, while perhaps embellished, captures the almost fantastical atmosphere of that night. They were literally swimming in money, a dream made manifest, a fortune beyond their wildest imaginings. But amidst the champagne toasts and backslapping, the first fatal cracks began to appear. The gang had planned to stay hidden at the farm for several days, allowing the initial police frenzy to subside. However, reports of police activity in the vicinity, perhaps exaggerated by their paranoia, led to a hasty, ill-advised decision to leave earlier than planned. This abrupt change in plans forced a hurried departure, and in their panicked rush, a critical failure occurred: the incomplete burning of their getaway vehicles. They attempted to destroy the evidence, but the flames didn't fully consume the trucks, leaving crucial clues for the inevitable police investigation that would follow. Even more egregious, and ultimately the most damning error, was their sloppy cleanup of the farmhouse itself. In their euphoria and frantic haste, they left fingerprints everywhere, on utensils, furniture, and infamously, on an HP sauce bottle in the kitchen. It was an amateurish oversight in an otherwise masterfully planned operation. This wasn't a betrayal in the traditional sense of one gang member selling out another, but rather a far more insidious form. The betrayal of their own meticulous plan by human carelessness, by the intoxicating rush of victory, and by the pressure of impending discovery. Their own lack of discipline became their undoing. The very success that fueled their celebration also blinded them to the lurking dangers. The intoxicating scent of millions proved to be a powerful, almost incapacitating sedative to their good judgment. They underestimated the tenacity of the law and overestimated their own invincibility. They had painstakingly rehearsed the heist, but had tragically neglected the equally vital exit strategy from the hideout. The rush to secure the loot overshadowed the critical need to meticulously erase their presence, leaving a breadcrumb trail for Scotland Yard to follow directly to their doorstep. The initial elation, so vibrant and intoxicating, quickly soured. The dream of freedom and unimaginable wealth began to morph into a terrifying reality, as the consequence of their oversight slowly, relentlessly dawned upon them. The grand triumph was now shadowed by the specter of imminent capture. The sheer irony was brutal. A plan designed with such intricate detail, executed with such precision, derailed by something as mundane as a half-burned truck and a condiment bottle. The luck that had smiled upon them during the heist had suddenly, dramatically, turned its formidable back. It wasn't long before the police stumbled upon the abandoned Leatherslade farm. The scene was a treasure trove of evidence, a gold mine for investigators. Led by the formidable Detective Superintendent Tommy Butler and his elite ghost squad from Scotland Yard, the hunt for the train robbers began in earnest, relentless, and methodical. The forensic team meticulously combed through the farmhouse, collecting every scrap of evidence. The fingerprints, smudged on the HP sauce bottle, on a Monopoly board, and various other surfaces, quickly became the linchpin of their investigation. It was a painstaking, yet incredibly effective piece of detective work. These vital fingerprints were cross-referenced with police databases, rapidly linking many of the robbers to previous, smaller crimes. The vast network of interconnected criminal records began to close in, forming an inescapable net around the unsuspecting gang members. The thread of justice, once frayed, was now tightening dramatically. The first arrests followed swiftly, sending shockwaves through the underworld and shattering the robbers' complacent belief that they had successfully escaped the long arm of the law. The surprise was profound. The realization that their meticulously planned freedom had evaporated, utterly replaced by the grim reality of imminent capture. The justice system, determined to make an example of these brazen criminals, handed down exceptionally heavy sentences. Most of the convicted members received 30-year prison terms, a clear and unequivocal message from the judiciary. Such audacious defiance of the law would not be tolerated, and its price would be staggeringly high. As the trials concluded and the sentences were passed, the great train robbery began its metamorphosis from a mere crime into a modern legend. The media, often captivated by the sheer audacity of the heist, inadvertently transformed the assaulters into a peculiar brand of anti-heroes, igniting public fascination. Simultaneously, authorities worked tirelessly to demystify this romanticized image, emphasizing the brutality inflicted upon Jack Mills and the sheer scale of the theft. They aimed to portray the robbers not as daring rogues, but as dangerous criminals who deserved their harsh punishment, to quell any misplaced public admiration. The scale of the investigation was unprecedented, involving hundreds of officers and countless hours of dedicated, relentless police work. It showcased the determination of the British legal system to bring to justice those who dared to challenge its authority in such a spectacular fashion. Despite the overwhelming evidence, some elements of the public seemed to secretly root for the villains, captivated by the David and Goliath narrative. This dichotomy of public perception further cemented the robbery's place in popular culture, adding layers of complexity to its enduring legacy. The fingerprints, those tiny, often overlooked markers of identity, ultimately sealed the fate of men who thought they were clever enough to outsmart the system. It was a stark, compelling lesson in the meticulous, unforgiving nature of forensic science and the relentless pursuit of justice. Among the captured, one name would rise above the rest to become a cultural icon: Ronald Biggs. His spectacular escape from Wandsworth Prison just 15 months after his sentencing, orchestrating a daring breakout over the prison walls, cemented his status as the most famous and perhaps most romanticized of the great train robbers. Biggs's subsequent flight led him on a globe-trotting escapade, eventually settling in Brazil, a country without an extradition treaty with the UK. His life there, a decades-long game of cat and mouse with British authorities, made him a symbol of rebellious defiance, a cheeky, anti-establishment figure loved by some, loathed by others. Biggs wasn't alone in his quest for freedom. Buster Edwards also managed to escape, living for years in Mexico before eventually surrendering. Charlie Wilson, another key player, pulled off his own daring escape from Winson Green Prison, eventually being recaptured in Canada after years on the run. These dramatic escapes and subsequent lives lived in clandestinity added another thrilling chapter to the great train robbery saga. Their stories were filled with close calls, new identities, and the constant, gnawing paranoia of eventual capture. A life of perpetual looking over one's shoulder. The ultimate destinies of the gang members varied dramatically. Biggs, after years of ill health and a desire to see England again, voluntarily returned in 2001, an old, frail man seeking peace. Other members served their time, Some faded into obscurity, others struggled with poverty and the burden of their past. Bruce Reynolds himself spent years as a fugitive before his inevitable capture, enduring prison and a difficult life after release. And what of the money? While a significant portion of the $2.6 million was eventually recovered by the relentless efforts of Scotland Yard, a substantial amount, millions in fact, simply vanished, never to be found. This lost treasure continues to fuel legends of hidden stashes, buried fortunes, and unsolved mysteries. The Great Train Robbery didn't just fade into history, it imprinted itself onto the collective consciousness. It spawned books, films, and countless documentaries, forever capturing the imagination with its blend of audacious planning, dramatic execution, and the very human story of ambition, greed, and its crushing consequences. The moral complexities of the story continue to resonate. Were they clever criminals who outsmarted a complacent system? Or were they reckless individuals who inflicted lasting harm for selfish gain? Public opinion has always been divided, highlighting the blurred lines between villainy and folk hero status. For many, the unrecovered money remains the ultimate allure, a tantalizing whisper of untold riches still waiting to be discovered, somewhere in the forgotten nooks and crannies of the British countryside. It adds a final, enduring layer of enigma to an already captivating tale. The legacy of the Great Train Robbery is multifaceted, a testament to daring criminality, a stark warning about human error, and a fascinating insight into the media's power to shape narratives. It reminds us that even the most meticulously crafted plans can be undone by the simplest of human flaws. The Great Train Robbery of 1963 was far more than just a monumental heist. It served as a profound watershed moment in British criminal history. It spectacularly seized the public's imagination like few crimes before or since, irrevocably transforming mere thieves into legendary figures, veritable anti-heroes in a society that, perhaps secretly, harbored a grudging admiration for their sheer audacity. Yet, strip away the alluring veneer of romanticized myth, and what remains is a stark, brutal narrative of devastating consequences. Jack Mills, the train's heroic driver, never truly recovered from the vicious attack. He lived out his remaining years haunted by fear and plagued by the physical and psychological scars, contributing to his premature death. The assailants themselves, even those who miraculously managed to escape the immediate dragnet, were condemned to a purgatorial existence. Their lives became an endless, wearying cycle of solitude, gnawing paranoia, and the constant, chilling specter of eventual capture. The initial, intoxicating glitter of fast fortune rapidly tarnished, fading before the harsh reality of decades spent in prison, forced exile, and the crushing loss of their families and ordinary lives. Without a single bullet fired, the robbery was clean, in its most literal, violent-free sense. However, the betrayal, the unforgivable betrayal of a meticulously crafted, almost perfect plan by human negligence, by the inescapable nature of left-behind evidence, and yes, by the fundamental fragility of a criminal organization that, in the final analysis, was not quite as flawless as it believed, ultimately sealed the fate of every single one involved. The Great Train Robbery stands as a chilling, timeless reminder that no matter how grandiose or intricate the design, how brilliant the scheme, humanity itself, with its inherent flaws, its insatiable ambitions, and its propensity for the simplest of errors, will always remain the most vulnerable, the weakest link in any chain, and the price of daring to become a legend, of reaching for that seemingly untouchable fortune, is almost invariably the forfeiture of one's most precious possession: freedom. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through one of history's most compelling criminal sagas. What are your thoughts on this legendary heist? Do you view them as masterminds or ultimately flawed individuals? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please give the video a like and subscribe for more untold stories from the shadows of history. Until next time.